My name is Chloe, and I'm 32 years old. Last Saturday, I stood at my father's lavish retirement party, surrounded by the city's most powerful people. This night was supposed to be a celebration of his 40-year legacy, a proud family milestone. But when my father raised his glass for a toast, his eyes found mine across the room. In front of 200 guests, he said the words that would change everything forever. My daughter Chloe is the biggest disgrace to this family. The silence was crushing. I felt every single eye on me, the humiliation burning hot on my face. Any last shred of hope I had for his approval just vanished. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't his quiet, struggling daughter anymore. And the response I was about to give him would be the most expensive mistake of his life. If you've ever felt completely unseen by your own family, let me know where you're watching from. And hit subscribe, because you're going to want to see this. While my family saw me as the struggling artist, the daughter who took a wrong turn after college, they were living in a past that no longer existed. Their image of me was frozen in time. They pictured me in a tiny, cramped apartment, eating ramen noodles and barely making rent. A little charity case they could feel sorry for at Sunday dinners. That image. It was a comfort to them. It validated their choices, and it made my father feel powerful. But the world they saw was not my world. My real life started after I closed the door to my apartment each morning. It happened in the glow of my monitor until 2 in the morning, fueled by coffee and a quiet, burning need to prove them all wrong. For 11 years, I didn't just do some art on the side. I was building an empire in secret. My battlefield was the digital world of startups and nonprofits. Places where a family name like Hamilton meant nothing, but results meant everything. I became a ghost, a legend in certain circles. They called me a brand wizard. A company with a great idea but no identity would come to me, and I would give them a soul, a logo, a website, a voice that cut through the noise. I wasn't just a designer. I was an architect of identity. While my father and brother were building skyscrapers out of steel and glass, I was building brands out of pixels and code. And my work, it had an impact. My days were a relentless grind. I'd wake up before the sun, answer emails from clients on the West Coast, and spend my mornings in deep creative focus. Afternoons were for client calls, for presentations where I'd walk CEOs through complex brand strategies with a confidence that would have shocked my family. I learned to speak their language, the language of ROI, of market penetration, of customer acquisition costs. But I spoke it with my own accent, an accent of color theory and typography and authentic storytelling. I lived and breathed this work. I sacrificed weekends, I missed parties. My personal life was a string of dates with guys who couldn't understand why I'd get a sudden flash of inspiration at dinner and have to sketch an idea on a napkin. The turning point, the project that solidified my reputation, was for the City Children's Hospital. Their fundraising efforts were failing. Their branding was outdated, stuck in the 90s. They had a powerful mission but a weak voice. They couldn't afford a big downtown agency, so they came to me. For 6 months, I poured every ounce of my energy into their campaign. I interviewed doctors, parents, and even some of the kids. I wanted to capture the heart of that place. The result was a campaign called The Smallest Heroes. It was raw, emotional, and honest. The initial fundraising goal was ambitious, $500,000, a number that made the hospital board nervous. I told them to trust me. The campaign launched on a Tuesday. By Friday, we had passed the goal. By the end of the month, we had raised nearly $800,000, enough to fund a new pediatric oncology wing. The story was picked up by the local business journal. There was a picture of me, standing with the hospital director, a huge, oversized check between us. The headline read, Local designer's pro bono campaign becomes a game changer for Children's Hospital. I bought 10 copies of that paper. I left one on the coffee table at my parents' house during my next dutiful Sunday visit. When I came back the next week, it was still there, untouched, with a coffee mug ring staining my face. They never even mentioned it. To them, it was just another piece of paper, cluttering up their perfect living room. It didn't involve the Hamilton name, so it didn't exist. That kind of deliberate ignorance. It used to hurt. It used to feel like a knife twisting in my gut. But over time, their blindness became my shield. It became my greatest advantage. Because while they were looking at me with pitying glances, thinking about their poor, struggling daughter, I was cashing checks. Big checks. My work for the tech startups and successful small businesses was incredibly lucrative. But I didn't upgrade my life. I kept my modest apartment. I kept driving my 10-year-old Honda. I didn't wear designer clothes. On the surface, I was exactly who they thought I was. But my bank account told a different story. I wasn't saving for a rainy day. I was building a war chest. Every dollar I earned after paying my bills and taxes went into a high-yield savings account and a carefully managed investment portfolio. I became obsessed with financial independence. It was my secret religion. For 11 years, I funneled my quiet success into this one single goal. One evening, about 4 months before that fateful retirement party, I was doing my quarterly financial review. I logged into my bank account, my heart pounding a little as I looked at the numbers. And then I saw it. The total balance. $254,781. Over $250,000. All mine. Earned by my own hands, my own mind. It wasn't Hamilton's money. It wasn't an inheritance or a handout. It was my freedom, converted into currency. In that moment, looking at that number on the screen, I realized something profound. My family's opinion. It was no longer the currency I valued. Their approval was a stock that had crashed long ago. My worth wasn't tied to their validation anymore. It was sitting right there, in that account. A silent, powerful testament to every late night, every missed party, every time they looked right through me. They had no idea who I had become. They still saw the little girl drawing flowers in the garden. They were about to meet the woman who had built her own fortress, brick by digital brick. And I had a feeling I was going to need it very, very soon. The storm didn't arrive without warning. There were signs. Little shifts in the atmosphere that you feel in your bones before you can see the clouds gathering. It all started about 3 months before the retirement party, with a summons disguised as a family meeting. My father never called meetings unless it was something big, something that affected the Hamilton name. I walked into his study, the room that always felt like a museum dedicated to his own success, and the air was thick with expectation. Ethan was already there, looking smug, while my mother served coffee in her finest china, her movements a little too precise, a little too tense. My father cleared his throat, a sound he used to command boardrooms, and announced his retirement. The transition plan was simple, he said. Ethan would take over as CEO. The board had already approved it. It was a coronation, not a discussion. I felt the familiar pang of being an outsider, a spectator in my own family's story. But then, he turned to me. His eyes had a strange glint in them, a look I couldn't quite decipher. He called it an exciting opportunity. He wanted me to come aboard as the director of marketing and communications for Hamilton Development. He laid out the offer like a king bestowing a favor upon a commoner, a salary of $250,000 a year, a corner office, stock options. He painted a picture of a future where I finally took my rightful place in the family empire. For a split second, the little girl inside me, the one who had always craved his approval, felt a surge of hope. but it was quickly extinguished by the cold reality of what he was really asking. He wasn't offering me a job because he valued my skills. He was offering me a golden cage. He was trying to buy my compliance, to absorb my independent success into his own legacy. I would be trading my creative freedom, my entire identity, for a paycheck and a title. The marketing for Hamilton Development was everything I hated. It was conservative, stale, and catered exclusively to old money. My soul would wither and die in that corner office. I told them I needed time to think about it. The change in the room was immediate. It was like a drop in barometric pressure. My father's face darkened. "Time to think about what, Chloe?" he boomed. "This is what you should have been doing for the last 11 years. It's time to grow up and contribute something instead of playing with your little art projects." There it was. That word. Contribute. As if my 11 years of building a business, of helping others, of paying my own way, meant absolutely nothing. I tried to explain, to talk about my clients, my passion, but he cut me off. "This family has given you everything," he seethed, "and you've given nothing in return." His words were like stones, each one a heavy, bruising blow. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly, and I told them I couldn't accept the position. The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. My father's face was a mask of cold fury. "Don't come crawling back," he warned, "when your little hobby stops paying the bills." That was the last real conversation we had before the party. After that, the Cold War began. The invitations to Sunday dinner suddenly stopped. My mother would text me with flimsy excuses. "Oh, honey, we decided to have a quiet weekend. Ethan and Ashley are coming over, it's just a small thing." I was being systematically erased. My brother, Ethan, my own brother, stopped answering my calls. I was being punished for my disobedience, for choosing my own path over the one they had laid out for me. The final petty insult came in the mail about 2 weeks before the party. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with the Hamilton family crest embossed in gold. Inside was the formal invitation to my own father's retirement party. It was addressed to Ms. Chloe Hamilton. Not Chloe, not our daughter, just Ms. Chloe Hamilton. Like I was a business associate, a stranger. It was a clear message. You are not one of us. I almost didn't go. I stared at that invitation for days, the elegant script mocking me. Part of me wanted to throw it in the trash and sever the ties for good. But another part, that stubborn, foolish part that still loved them, refused to let them write me off completely. This was my father's life achievement. I felt I had to be there, even if it was just to be a ghost in the room. I thought maybe, just maybe, the celebratory mood might soften their hearts. I was so incredibly naive. The night of the party was a surreal out-of-body experience. I walked into that grand ballroom at the country club, feeling like an imposter in my simple black dress. My parents stood at the entrance, greeting the city's elite with practiced smiles. When I approached, their smiles tightened. My mother gave me a brief air kiss near my cheek. My father shook my hand. My own father shook my hand like I was a stranger he'd just met. The awkwardness was suffocating. I found my assigned table, table 12, tucked away in a far corner as far from the head table as you could get. I sat through the dinner, picking at my food, watching my family from across the room. I watched them laugh and mingle. I watched my brother give a heartfelt, glowing speech about our father's legacy. I watched the mayor present him with a key to the city. And through it all, I felt a profound and aching loneliness. Then it was my father's turn to speak. He stood at the podium, a titan in his own world, basking in the adoration of the crowd. He was charming, powerful, and every word was perfectly chosen. He thanked his partners, his colleagues, and his wife. He praised my brother, calling him the future of the company, the son any father would be proud of. The room hung on his every word. And then his eyes scanned the crowd and they landed on me. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. The clinking of glasses stopped. He paused for what felt like an eternity, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. "You know," he began, his voice amplified by the microphone, "I've been blessed with a wonderful family. My son, Ethan, has made me prouder than any father has a right to be." He paused again, letting the weight of his words settle, his eyes still locked on mine. "But tonight," he continued, "I also want to acknowledge my daughter, Chloe." For just a moment, a tiny, stupid flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the moment of reconciliation. "You're the biggest disgrace to this family." The words hit the room like a physical shockwave. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. 200 of the most influential people in the city turned in their chairs to stare at me. I could feel the blood drain from my face. My body went cold. At the head table, my brother looked stunned, his mouth slightly open. My mother. My mother just stared down at her plate, her face a mask of horror. But she said nothing. She did nothing. Her silence was its own form of betrayal. But my father wasn't finished. He was enjoying this. He leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescending pity. 11 years, he said, savoring the public humiliation he was inflicting. 11 years I've waited for you to grow up and contribute something meaningful. Instead, you waste your time with finger paints and computer games while your brother builds a real career, while your brother upholds the Hamilton name. That was the moment. The moment the last thread of connection, of love, of obligation, finally snapped. It wasn't just an insult anymore. It was a public execution of my character, my career, my entire life's work. He didn't just disagree with my choices. He wanted to destroy me for making them. And he chose to do it on the biggest stage of his life, ensuring that this humiliation would be the only thing people remembered about me. And my family, my mother and my brother, they just sat there and let him do it. And that's when I realized, after all the years of sacrifice, of trying to be good enough, my own family had just disowned me in the cruelest way imaginable. At this point, I don't even know what word to use for that feeling. If you're feeling as outraged as I am right now, help me out and comment with one word to describe what this family just did. But instead of crumbling, that rage, that profound sense of betrayal, it turned into a cold, hard strength I never knew I possessed. As my father's words echoed in the silent ballroom, a strange calm washed over me. The burning shame, the hot sting of humiliation, it all just evaporated. It was replaced by something cold, something hard. It was the chilling clarity of absolute truth. For my entire life, I had been operating under a delusion. The delusion that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, stayed quiet enough, one day they would finally see me. They would finally be proud of me. That hope had been the driving force behind so much of my life. It had been a quiet, constant ache in my chest. And in that one brutal moment, my father didn't just insult me. He surgically removed that hope from my body. He set me free. I stood up. My legs felt surprisingly steady. My hand, holding the champagne glass, was perfectly still. I looked at my father, standing at the podium, his face a mixture of shock and triumphant cruelty. I looked at my mother, who couldn't meet my gaze. I looked at my brother, who just sat there, paralyzed by his own cowardice. And I didn't feel sadness. I didn't even feel anger anymore. I felt nothing. A profound, empty, and incredibly powerful nothing. It was the feeling of a chain, rusted and heavy from years of expectation, finally shattering. "Perfect," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. "Then erase me from your will, too." The sound of his champagne glass shattering on the marble floor was the starting pistol for the rest of my life. I gave my speech. I laid out 11 years of their hypocrisy and my silence. And then, I walked away. I walked out of that ballroom, past the 200 stunned faces, and I didn't look back. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the traffic lights or the turns. It was like my body was on autopilot while my mind was being completely rewired. All the old programming, the deep-seated need to please them, the fear of their disapproval. It was all being deleted, line by painful line. When I got to my apartment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw things. The Chloe who would have done that, the one who would have collapsed in a heap of tears, had died in that ballroom tonight. I walked into my kitchen, still in my black dress, and the first thing I saw was my phone, lighting up like a Christmas tree. Call after call. My brother, Ethan, my mother. Various aunts and uncles who had witnessed the spectacle. I watched the screen flash their names, one after another, and I felt a complete and total detachment. It was like watching a movie about someone else's family. I put the phone on silent and slid it across the counter. It was their panic, not mine. My pain had transformed. It had calcified into a diamond-hard resolve. All the energy I had wasted for years trying to earn their love, it was now being redirected. It was becoming fuel. I sat down at my kitchen counter, opened my laptop, and the screen flickered to life. My inbox was a sea of notifications, mostly spam and work-related emails. But one subject line caught my eye. It was from a name I recognized, but didn't know personally. Leo Martinez, CEO of Tech Forward, a fast-growing software company that had been making waves in the tech scene. The subject line was simple: impressive. I clicked it open, my curiosity piqued. The email was short and to the point. He wrote that he had been at a table near the back of the retirement party tonight. He had seen the whole thing. He said he wasn't writing to offer pity. He was writing because, in his words, he had never seen someone stand up to that kind of old-guard pressure with that much guts. He went on to say that he had been looking at my online portfolio for the last hour, and that my work was exactly the kind of disruptive, authentic voice he had been looking for to rebrand his company. He wrote, "I don't hire resumes, I hire fighters, and you're clearly a fighter." Attached to the email was a proposal, a 6-month contract to overhaul the entire brand identity for Tech Forward. The scope of work was massive. It was bigger than any single project I had ever handled. And then I saw the number at the bottom of the page. The project fee. $150,000. I stared at the number. $150,000. It was more than I usually made in an entire year. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline. It was a declaration of war. It was the universe handing me the exact weapon I needed, at the exact moment I needed it. My father had tried to humiliate me by calling my career a worthless hobby. And here, in my inbox, was a contract that would single-handedly earn me more than half of my brother's prestigious law firm salary in just 6 months. The irony was so thick, so delicious, I almost laughed out loud. This was my moment. This was the fork in the road. I could let my father's words define me, let them shrink me down into the disgrace he wanted me to be. Or I could take this opportunity and build something so successful, so undeniable, that his opinion would become nothing more than a pathetic, irrelevant whisper from the past. There was no hesitation. There was no doubt. The decision had already been made for me the moment he opened his mouth. My movements were precise, methodical. I downloaded the contract. I read through every line item, every clause. It was standard, fair, and incredibly generous. I opened my digital signature software. I signed my name, Chloe Hamilton, with a steady hand. My full name. The name he thought he could take from me. I attached the signed contract to a new email. My reply to Leo Martinez was just as short and to the point as his had been. Thank you, Leo, I'm in. Let's build something great. I hit send. The moment the email was gone, a profound sense of peace settled over me. This was step one. The first move in a chess game my family didn't even know they were playing. They thought they had delivered the final blow, the checkmate. They had no idea I was just setting up the board. For 11 years, I had played defense. I had reacted, I had endured, I had absorbed their negativity. But not anymore. From this moment on, I was on the offense. I stood up and walked over to my window, looking out at the city lights. My father's world was out there. The skyscrapers his company had built. The institutions that bore his name. It was a world of concrete and steel, of power and legacy. He thought he owned this city. He thought he owned me. What he didn't understand was that a new world was being built, a digital world where power wasn't inherited. It was earned. Where your voice was more valuable than your last name. And in that world, I wasn't his disgraced daughter. I was a creator, an architect. And I was just getting started. The phone on the counter was still buzzing, a desperate, unanswered plea from a world I no longer belonged to. I let it buzz. The old Chloe was gone. The new one had work to do. The 6 months I spent rebranding Tech Forward were a blur of creative intensity. It was the hardest I had ever worked, and the most alive I had ever felt. We launched their new identity to rave reviews, and their market share soared. The success of that project acted like a magnet. Suddenly, my one-woman operation was fielding calls from venture capital firms, established companies, and ambitious startups, all wanting a piece of the magic. My secret was out. I hired my first 2 employees, 2 brilliant young designers who were hungry and full of ideas. I leased a small, industrial chic office space in a converted warehouse downtown. I named my company Creative Haven, a place where good ideas could find a home, free from the judgment of conservative boardrooms. We were the underdogs, the disruptors, and we were winning. About a year after the retirement party, the city announced the biggest creative project it had seen in a decade. They were putting out a bid to completely rebrand the downtown arts district. It was a massive undertaking, a legacy project that would shape the city's cultural identity for years to come. The contract was worth $500,000. It was the kind of project that could catapult a small agency like mine into the major leagues overnight. I knew, with every fiber of my being, that we had to win it. It was more than just a contract. It was a statement. For weeks, my team and I lived and breathed this project. We poured our hearts into creating a proposal that was bold, innovative, and deeply connected to the city's soul. The day of the final presentation to the City Council felt like stepping into an arena. There were only 2 finalists: my company, Creative Haven, and Hamilton Development. Of course, it was inevitable, wasn't it? I walked into the sterile, intimidating boardroom and saw them sitting at the opposite table. My father and my brother, Ethan. They both wore identical, expensive suits, their faces set in masks of arrogant confidence. My father looked at me not like a daughter, but like a minor annoyance, a gnat to be swatted away. He was on his home turf. He had known most of the people on this council for decades. He had played golf with them, donated to their campaigns. To him, this was just a formality. My team and I went first. I stood before the council, my heart pounding, but my voice was steady. I didn't just present a design. I told a story. I painted a picture of a vibrant, modern, inclusive arts district that would attract a new generation of artists and patrons. I could feel the energy in the room shift. The younger council members were leaning forward, nodding. They were getting it. They were seeing the future. When I finished, there was a moment of genuine, appreciative silence. Then, my father stood up. He walked to the podium with the easy confidence of a man who had never lost a fight in his life. He didn't even open his proposal binder. He didn't need to. His entire pitch was based on one thing: himself. He spoke about the Hamilton family's long history in the city. He talked about stability, reliability, and a trusted name. It was a masterclass in old guard politics, an appeal to the past, to the way things had always been done. And then, he played his trump card. He paused, looked around the room, and let his gaze settle on me. A sad, disappointed sigh escaped his lips. "The Arts District is the heart of our city," he said, his voice laced with false concern. "And the council has a serious decision to make. Do you entrust that heart to a name that has built this city for 3 generations? Or," he paused dramatically, "do you hand it over to a new, unproven entity, led by an individual known for, let's just say, a certain public volatility?" The air was sucked out of the room. He did it. He actually did it. He took the ugliest moment of my life, a moment he himself had created, and he was now weaponizing it against me in a professional setting. He was painting me as unstable, as a liability, as a risk not worth taking. He was trying to assassinate my character to win a contract. I looked over at Ethan, hoping for a flicker of shame, of protest, but he just stared at his hands, his silence a deafening confirmation of his loyalty. In that moment, I saw them for what they truly were: a united front, willing to do anything to maintain their power, even if it meant destroying their own. But something had changed in the year since that party. I was no longer the girl who flinched at his disapproval. The city had changed too. A young councilwoman, a sharp, progressive woman named Mrs. Davis, cleared her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Hamilton," she said, her tone crisp and professional. "But this bid is about the best vision for the future of the Arts District, not the past. And frankly, the vision presented by Creative Haven is the most compelling and forward-thinking proposal this council has seen in years." My father's confident smile faltered for just a second. It was the first time I had ever seen him publicly challenged. He wasn't prepared for a world that didn't automatically bend to his will. The 2 weeks we waited for the council's decision were agonizing. It was a test of everything I now believed in. Could fresh ideas and raw talent really win against a lifetime of backroom deals and established power? My father, I'm sure, was calling in every favor he was owed. He would be working the phones, hosting private dinners, and reminding everyone of his influence. I, on the other hand, had nothing but the work itself. I had to trust that the strength of our vision was enough. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was the city manager's office. My entire team gathered around my desk, holding their breath as I put the phone on speaker. "Ms. Hamilton," the voice said, "I'm calling to officially inform you that the City Council has voted unanimously to award the Arts District rebranding contract to Creative Haven." The office erupted. There were screams, hugs, and tears of joy. We had done it. We, the tiny upstart agency, had taken on the biggest giant in the city and won. We had won based on merit. We had won based on the work. But for me, it was so much more than that. I walked over to the large window of my office, the same window where I had once looked out and felt so small, and I looked down at the city. My city. The boom moment, the real explosion, wasn't a shouting match or a dramatic confrontation. It was quiet. It was a headline. The next morning, on the front page of the business journal, a place my father had dominated for 40 years, was a huge, bold headline: Upstart Creative Haven beats Hamilton Development for Landmark Arts District Contract. There was a picture of me, smiling, standing in front of my team. And there was a smaller file photo of my father, looking stern and outdated. That headline was the bomb. It was a public declaration that the old ways were over. The king had been dethroned. The story he had told about me, the unstable, disgraceful daughter with a silly hobby, had been utterly and completely demolished by a single undeniable fact: the fact that I was better at this than he was. My work had spoken for itself, and its voice was louder than his insults, louder than his influence, louder than his money. I hadn't just won a contract. I had won back my own narrative, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that the aftershocks of this explosion were just beginning. The phone call was coming. I knew it was, and this time, I would be the one in control. The headline in the business journal wasn't just ink on paper. It was a lit match dropped into a puddle of gasoline. The explosion was not immediate, but it was spectacular. The first tremor came just hours after the paper hit the newsstands, in the form of my phone ringing. It was a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a cold, formal voice introduced itself as Arthur Vance, my father's corporate attorney. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He informed me, in the driest legal terms possible, that my father was demanding I immediately cease from using the Hamilton name in any professional capacity. He claimed my public theatrics, and now my overt professional antagonism, were damaging the family brand. I almost laughed. Damaging the brand? He was the one who had turned his own retirement party into a public spectacle of cruelty. Arthur, I said, my voice calm and even. My name is Chloe Hamilton. It's on my birth certificate. If my father has an issue with that, he can sue me. And you can tell him I'm very much looking forward to the discovery process. I could almost hear the man's jaw clenching through the phone. I hung up before he could respond. That was the first volley. A pathetic attempt to intimidate me, to strip me of my own identity. It was a bully's move, and it reeked of desperation. But I had underestimated the depths of his panic. The real attack came the next day. I was in a meeting with my team, brainstorming initial concepts for the Arts District project, when my phone buzzed with a text from Leo Martinez, the CEO of Tech Forward. The text just said, "You are not going to believe the call I just got. Call me when you're free." A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I excused myself from the meeting and called him immediately. "Leo, what's going on?" I asked. His voice was a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Your father," he said. "Richard Hamilton just called my personal cell phone. I have no idea how he even got the number. He told me that my father had spent 10 minutes on the phone systematically trashing me. He called me unstable, unprofessional, vindictive, and mentally unwell. He painted a picture of me as a ticking time bomb that was going to destroy Tech Forward's reputation. He warned Leo that my recent success was a fluke, and that I was about to implode and take his company down with me. It was a character assassination of the highest order. But that wasn't the worst of it. After the verbal assault, my father made his move. He offered to have Hamilton Development's in-house marketing team take over the entire Tech Forward rebranding project, completing all the remaining work, for the symbolic price of $1. $1. He framed it as a goodwill gesture to save Leo from the catastrophic mistake of hiring his troubled daughter. I felt the blood run cold in my veins. This wasn't just a threat anymore. This was a direct, calculated attempt to sabotage my career, to destroy my livelihood. My own father was actively trying to ruin me, to rip my biggest client right out from under me. He was willing to leverage the resources of his multi-million-dollar corporation not just to compete with me, but to obliterate me. The sheer malice of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just trying to teach me a lesson, he was trying to break me. For a moment, I felt a surge of pure terror. What if it worked? What if Leo, a pragmatic CEO, decided that dealing with this family drama just wasn't worth the hassle? My entire future, the future of Creative Haven, hung in the balance of this one man's decision. But then Leo spoke again, and his words were like a shield against my father's venom. "Chloe," he said, his voice now rock solid. "I want you to know exactly what I told your father. I told him that I found his tactics to be pathetic and disgusting. I told him that I value talent and integrity over intimidation and nepotism. And I told him that if he ever contacted me or anyone at my company again, my legal team would be filing a harassment complaint so fast it would make his head spin." He took a breath. "And then I told him that our contract with you is ironclad, and that after seeing how he operates, I'm doubling down on our partnership with Creative Haven. In fact, I'm going to make it my personal mission to ensure that everyone in my network knows what a brilliant, resilient professional you are." I sank into my chair, the relief so overwhelming it almost buckled my knees. He had my back. This man, a relative stranger, had shown me more loyalty and respect in one 5-minute phone call than my own father had shown me in 32 years. When the direct assault failed, the manipulation began. It started with my mother. She left me a series of tearful voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. She didn't talk about what my father had done. She never acknowledged his behavior. Instead, she talked about how much he was hurting, how this whole situation was tearing the family apart. She painted him as the victim. "How could you be so cruel to your own father?" she sobbed in one message. "He gave you everything, and this is how you repay him? By trying to publicly humiliate him? You've broken his heart, Chloe." It was classic gaslighting. She was trying to make me feel guilty for his actions. She wanted me to take responsibility for the consequences of his own cruelty. She wanted me to apologize for winning. It was a psychological pretzel I had been twisted into my entire life, and for the first time, I refused to play the game. I deleted the voicemails without responding. Then came Ethan. He sent me a long, self-righteous email. It was a masterpiece of passive aggression. He wrote about family loyalty and showing respect. He accused me of being selfish and having a victim complex. He said that my ambition was unbecoming and that I was destroying Dad's legacy. The hypocrisy was staggering. This was coming from the man who had sat in silence while his own sister was publicly disowned. The man who had tried to help his father sabotage my career just a week earlier. He wasn't defending our father. He was defending the system that had benefited him his entire life. A system I was now threatening to dismantle. The final act of their desperate play came in person. They showed up at my office, unannounced. My father, my mother, and Ethan. The holy trinity of dysfunction. They bypassed the front desk and walked straight into my office, closing the door behind them. My father's face was a thundercloud of rage. My mother looked like she was on the verge of tears. Ethan just looked weak. "This stops now," my father growled, his voice low and menacing. "This little rebellion of yours is over. You will call the city manager's office tomorrow morning. You will tell them you are withdrawing your bid, and you will issue a public apology for the embarrassment you have caused this family." It wasn't a request. It was an order. He still thought he was in charge. He still thought he could command me, even here, in the space I had built with my own 2 hands. My mother stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her like she was praying. "Please, Chloe," she whispered. "Think about what you're doing. You're tearing us apart. We can fix this. We can go back to how things were. Just do what your father says. Go back to how things were." The words hung in the air, revealing the terrifying truth of their delusion. They didn't want to change. They didn't want to heal. They just wanted me back in my box. Quiet, compliant, powerless. I looked at their three faces, and for the first time, I didn't see my family. I saw three strangers united by a common fear. The fear of losing control. The fear of a world where their name, their money, and their power were no longer enough. Their panic was a tangible thing in the room, a sour, desperate smell. And in the face of their meltdown, I felt a calm, quiet strength solidify within me. The power in this room had shifted. It no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. I looked at the three of them, standing there in my office, my space, trying to impose their will on me as they had done my entire life. My father's barely controlled rage, my mother's practiced manipulative tears, my brother's silent, spineless compliance. It was the same toxic cocktail they had always used to control me, but it had lost its potency. I was immune. I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the silence hang in the air, letting them marinate in their own powerlessness. I walked from behind my desk and stood in the center of the room, creating a physical space between us. I wasn't their little girl anymore. I was the CEO of this company, and they were uninvited guests. "Let me make this clear," I began. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a razor. It was a voice they had never heard from me before, a voice devoid of fear, of pleading, of any desire for their approval. There will be no withdrawal. There will be no apology. Creative Haven won the Arts District contract because we had the best proposal. Period. Your attempts to intimidate me, to sabotage my business, to slander my name, they are over. I looked directly at my father. Your legacy, I said, letting the word hang in the air, is yours to worry about. It is no longer my concern. You are right about one thing you said at that party. I have not contributed to the Hamilton family business, and I never will. My contribution is to my own business, to my clients, to my team. My loyalty is to them now, not to a family that sees me as a disgrace one day and a tool to be controlled the next. Then I turned to my mother. Her tears were flowing freely now, but they did not affect me. Your feelings, I said, my voice softening slightly but still firm, are your own responsibility. For 32 years, I have carried the burden of your anxieties and your social pressures. I have contorted myself into shapes that were not my own to make you comfortable, to make you look good in front of your friends. That is over. I will no longer be the shock absorber for this family's dysfunction. Finally, I looked at Ethan. He wouldn't meet my eyes. And you, I said, and for the first time, a flicker of the old pain, the pain of a sister betrayed, came through. You stood by and watched. You have always stood by and watched. Your silence has been your contribution. And I want you to know, I will never forget it. I walked over to the door and opened it. This meeting is over, I stated, not as a request, but as a fact. You are not welcome in my place of business, and you are no longer welcome in my life. Any further communication from any of you will be directed to my attorney. My father's face was a mottled shade of purple. He looked like he was about to explode. He took a step towards me, his finger jabbing the air. You will regret this, Chloe, he spat. No, I replied, my voice steady as a rock. I won't. The only thing I regret is that it took me this long. Now please leave. For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. I chose myself over their approval. I chose my peace over their chaos. This was a huge moment. If you support this powerful decision, drop a flexed bicep emoji in the comments to send some strength her way for the journey ahead. As they walked out, defeated and sputtering, I didn't feel a sense of triumph. I just felt quiet. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the war was finally over. the quiet of a space that has been cleared of toxic debris, the quiet of a new beginning. I closed the door, leaned against it, and took the first truly free breath of my adult life. That night, the silence in my apartment felt different. It wasn't the lonely silence of before. It was a peaceful, expansive silence. I took my phone, and with a sense of calm ceremony, I went to my contacts. I found my father's name. I hit block. I found my mother's name. I hit block. I found Ethan's name. I hit block. With each tap of the screen, I felt another chain fall away. It was a digital amputation, a necessary severing of ties that were poisoning my soul. The next morning, I walked into my office, and the energy was electric. My team had seen my family leave the day before. They didn't know the details, but they knew something significant had happened. They looked at me with a new level of respect. I wasn't just their boss anymore. I was their leader. And as we dove into the Arts District project, we became more than just a team. We became a tribe, my family of choice. This was my new family, a family built not on blood and obligation, but on mutual respect, shared passion, and a collective desire to create something beautiful in the world. And then there was Leo Martinez. He became more than just a client. He became a mentor and a friend. He would call just to check in, to see how I was holding up. He had seen the ugly underbelly of the old boys club my father represented, and he championed me at every opportunity. He introduced me to other CEOs, to investors, to journalists. He used his influence not to control me, but to empower me. He saw my talent not as a threat, but as an asset. He was showing me what true, healthy, professional support looked like. It was a revelation. In the rubble of my old life, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. I was building a new business, a new support system, and a new, stronger version of myself. The attacks from my biological family had been designed to isolate me, to make me feel small and alone. But they had backfired spectacularly. They had forced me to reach out, to build new connections, to find my strength not in the approval of a broken family, but in the respect of a healthy community. I was finally discovering that the family you choose is infinitely more powerful than the family you are born into. And for the first time, I felt truly, unconditionally supported. I was finally home. 2 years passed, 2 years of relentless work, strategic growth, and profound peace. Creative Haven was no longer the scrappy underdog. We were a force to be reckoned with, a team of 12 brilliant minds in a sprawling, light-filled office that felt more like a creative laboratory than a workplace. I had bought a condo downtown with a view of the skyline, a skyline I was now helping to shape. Life was good. It was a life I had built, not one I had inherited. The silence from my biological family was absolute. But news travels in a city like ours. I heard whispers through mutual acquaintances. Hamilton Development was struggling. After losing the Arts District contract, their reputation for being invincible had been shattered. Several of their longtime clients, legacy institutions, had left them for more modern, agile firms. Some of them had even become my clients. My father's old-world handshake deal way of doing business was failing in a new world market. I heard that Ethan, under the immense pressure to live up to our father's legacy, had made a series of disastrous investment decisions, costing the company millions. The empire was showing cracks. The golden child was discovering that the real world didn't hand out participation trophies. Then, one afternoon, my assistant told me I had a visitor. It was my father. He was waiting in the lobby. I had her show him to the main conference room, a glass-walled space in the center of our office. I wanted him to see what I had built. He looked older, smaller. The arrogant fire in his eyes had been replaced by a weary resignation. He didn't come to yell or demand. He came with a thick binder which he placed on the table between us. It was a proposal. He admitted that Hamilton Development was failing to connect with the modern market. Their brand was stale. Their legacy was becoming a liability. He wanted to hire Creative Haven to completely overhaul their brand identity. He slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a contract. A 7-figure contract. I looked at him, and I didn't feel anger or even satisfaction. I just felt a quiet sense of closure. He wasn't my father in that moment. He was just another client, a desperate one. I agreed to take the project, but on my terms. "This is strictly business," I told him. "My team will lead. There will be no family interference. We will treat you exactly as we treat any other client." He just nodded. "I wouldn't expect anything less," he said. A few months later, I stood on a stage at the annual business gala, held at the very same country club where my life had been torn apart 2 years earlier. I was there to accept the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award. As I gave my speech, I saw my father in the audience. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before: genuine, unadulterated pride. After the ceremony, he approached me. "You've earned this," he said simply. And then, he said the words I had once thought I needed to hear to survive. "I was wrong, Chloe. You're not a disgrace to this family. You're probably the best thing about it." I thanked him, and I meant it. But the strange thing was, hearing those words, it didn't feel like the earth-shattering validation I had once craved. It was just nice. It was nice to have, but it was no longer necessary for my happiness. My self-worth was no longer up for his approval. I had already validated myself. Looking back, the greatest gift my family ever gave me was their rejection. Their cruelty was the catalyst that forced me to build my own foundation, to find my own tribe, and to define my own success. I learned that your value isn't determined by the people who are supposed to love you. It's determined by you. It's forged in the fires of your own hard work, your own integrity, and your own resilience. Sometimes, being cast out is the only way to find out where you truly belong. And sometimes, the most painful moments of our lives are not the end of our story, but the explosive, necessary beginning of our greatest triumphs. My story had a happy ending, but I know that for many people, the struggle with family expectations and toxic dynamics is a daily reality. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with a family member who just didn't get it? How did you navigate that painful conversation? Share your experience in the comments below, because your story might be the one thing someone else needs to hear today to feel less alone. And please, if this story resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding your voice. Thank you for listening.